The winter of 1978 was colder than usual in Yuba County. Snow fell heavily on the mountain roads, and the wind howled through the pine trees like a hungry wolf. On February 24th, 5 friends decided to go to a basketball game at the local high school. None of them knew this would be their last normal day on Earth. Gary Thompson drove his blue Ford pickup truck to pick up his friends one by one. First was Mike Russell, who jumped into the passenger seat with a bag of snacks. Then came David Carter, James Wilson, and finally Robert Anderson. They were all regular guys with regular jobs. Gary coached basketball, Mike fixed cars, David sold insurance, James worked at the radio station, and Robert taught physics at the high school. The basketball game was exciting. Their team won by 2 points in the final seconds. The 5 friends celebrated at Joe's Diner, eating burgers and talking about the game. They stayed until 10 o'clock, when Joe had to close up for the night. The waitress, Mary, was the last person to see them alive. She remembered them being happy and normal, just 5 friends having a good time. They left the diner in Gary's truck. The night was dark, and snow was starting to fall again. According to the gas station camera on Main Street, they drove north toward the mountain road at 10:17 p.m. This was the last time anyone saw Gary's blue truck moving. Sheriff Linda Marshall got the first call at 6:30 a.m. the next morning. Gary hadn't come home, and his wife was worried. Within an hour, 4 more calls came in from different families. None of the men had returned home. Linda knew something was wrong. These weren't teenagers or troublemakers. They were grown men with jobs and families. The sheriff organized a search team. They found Gary's truck at 2:45 p.m., parked neatly on the side of Mountain Road 412. The truck was empty, but everything seemed normal. The keys were in the ignition. 5 sets of footprints led away from the truck into the woods. They looked like normal walking prints, no signs of running or fighting. Inside the truck, they found strange things. All 5 men's wallets were there, with their money still inside. Their jackets were still on the seats, even though it was below freezing outside. On the dashboard was a map with a circle drawn around an old mining area. Nobody knew why they would go there, especially at night. The strangest thing was the truck's radio. It was stuck between stations, making a weird buzzing sound that nobody could explain. When they tried to turn it off, it kept playing. The mechanic who checked it later said it shouldn't have worked at all. The battery was completely dead. Sheriff Marshall called for help from nearby counties. By nightfall, 50 people were searching the woods. They found nothing. No footprints beyond the first 100 yards, no broken branches, no pieces of clothing. It was as if the 5 men had walked into the forest and vanished into thin air. That night, as Linda sat in her office looking at the men's photos, the lights flickered 3 times. Her coffee cup vibrated on her desk, and for just a second, all the phones in the station rang at once. She didn't know it then, but this was just the beginning of the strangest case in Yuba County history. The disappearance of the Yuba County 5 was about to become more than just a missing persons case. Something impossible had happened on that mountain road, something that would challenge everything Linda thought she knew about the world. And somewhere in the dark woods, 5 men were about to discover that reality was not what they thought it was. 3 months passed slowly in Yuba County. Spring came, the snow melted, and hope began to fade. Sheriff Linda Marshall kept searching, but most people thought the 5 men were gone forever. Then, on a warm day in May, everything changed. A park ranger named Bill Parker was checking trails after the winter snow melted. He found the first body in a clearing 12 miles from where the truck had been parked. It was Gary Thompson, the basketball coach. He was lying on his back in the grass, but something was very wrong. His clothes were completely dry and clean, like he had just put them on. There was no sign that animals had been near him, which was impossible after 3 months in the woods. The strangest thing was Gary's face. His eyes were wide open, and his face showed pure fear. But the doctors said he hadn't been hurt at all. He hadn't frozen, starved, or been attacked. It was as if he had simply stopped living in a moment of terror. 2 days later, they found Mike Russell and David Carter. They were sitting against a tree trunk, 6 miles east of Gary. Like Gary, their clothes were clean and dry. Their watches had all stopped at exactly 3:47 a.m. on the night they disappeared. In Mike's pocket was a small metal disc that no one could identify. It was warm to the touch, even after 3 months in the cold ground. James Wilson's body turned up next, near an old cave entrance. He was holding a camera, and his position suggested he had been taking pictures of something when he died. When the police developed the film, most of the photos were completely black. But one picture showed what looked like a door made of light in the middle of the forest. The experts said the photo wasn't fake, but they couldn't explain what it showed. Robert Anderson, the physics teacher, was still missing. The police dogs wouldn't go near the areas where they found the bodies. Even the birds seemed to avoid flying over these spots. At night, people living near the forest reported seeing strange lights and hearing a low humming sound that made their teeth hurt. Sheriff Marshall noticed other odd things. All 4 men had the same strange burn mark on their right hands, a perfect circle with 3 dots inside it. Their fingernails had grown as if they had been alive for those 3 months, but their hair hadn't grown at all. The temperature around their bodies stayed cold, even in the warm sun. The families wanted answers, but Linda had none to give. The autopsies showed nothing wrong with the men's bodies. It was as if they had just decided to stop living all at once. But the fear on their faces told a different story. They had seen something in those woods, something that had scared them to death. One night, while looking through the men's belongings again, Linda found something she had missed. In Gary's wallet was a note written in his handwriting. It said, "They're coming through. God help us, they're coming through." The paper was dated February 24th, 3:46 a.m., 1 minute before their watches stopped. As Linda sat in her office staring at the note, her coffee cup started to vibrate again. The phones rang once, all together, just like the night the men disappeared. And somewhere in the dark woods, a door made of light began to open once more. Detective Tom Bradford arrived in Yuba County on a hot June morning in 1979. He had solved many hard cases before, but nothing like this one. The state police sent him because Sheriff Marshall's reports made no sense. 4 dead men who looked like they had died yesterday, even though they had been missing for months. Tom set up his office in the police station's back room. He pinned photos of the 5 men on the wall and started reading every report. He was a careful man who believed everything had a simple answer. But after 1 week, he started to doubt everything he knew. The first strange thing he found was in the men's blood tests. The lab results showed something impossible. Their blood had traces of a metal that didn't exist on Earth. It was like nothing any scientist had ever seen before. When they tried to study it, the metal samples disappeared into thin air. Then there were the brain scans from the autopsies. Normal brain scans of dead people show nothing. The brain stops working when someone dies, but these scans showed patterns of activity that happened after the men were already dead. It was as if their minds kept working even though their bodies had stopped. The biggest mystery came from James Wilson's camera. Tom had experts look at all the photos again. Most were just black, but 3 new images appeared when they used special equipment. One showed a building made of metal and glass, sitting in the middle of the forest. The second showed men in white suits walking through walls of light. The third photo was too blurry to see clearly, but it seemed to show someone who looked exactly like Robert Anderson, the still missing man, standing next to a machine that glowed blue. Tom talked to Mary, the waitress from Joe's Diner who had seen them last. She remembered something new. Just before the men left, all their watches started running backward for exactly 1 minute. She hadn't reported it before because she thought she was just tired and seeing things. The detective found more weird clues. The metal disc from Mike's pocket had strange writing on it that changed every time someone looked at it. The burn marks on their hands gave off a faint light that only cameras could see. And every time Tom got close to understanding something, the electricity in the police station would go crazy. Linda showed Tom the old mining area marked on the map from Gary's truck. When they went there, they found nothing but trees and rocks. But their compasses stopped working, and their phones showed the wrong time. Tom's watch, which had never been wrong before, started running backward just like the men's watches had at the diner. That night, Tom wrote in his notebook, "This isn't just a murder case. These men found something in these woods, something that wasn't supposed to be here. The question isn't who killed them, it's what did they see." As he wrote these words, all the lights in town flickered at once. Dogs started barking everywhere, and far up in the mountains, where the old mine was supposed to be, a blue light flashed in the darkness. The investigation was about to take a turn that would change everything Tom thought he knew about reality. The black car arrived at the Yuba County Police Station exactly at noon. Captain Jennifer Hayes stepped out wearing an Air Force uniform with 2 silver bars on her shoulders. She walked straight to Sheriff Marshall's office and closed the door. What she said next changed everything about the case. "Your missing men," she said, spreading files across Linda's desk, "weren't the first ones, and they won't be the last." She showed them pictures of other missing people from across the country. All of them had the same strange burn marks. All of their watches had stopped at 3:47 a.m. on different nights. Tom Bradford watched as Captain Hayes pointed to a map. Red dots showed where people had gone missing. Blue dots showed where they were found. The dots made a pattern that looked like a giant circle across America. Yuba County was right at the center. "On the night your men disappeared," Hayes explained, 3 different radar stations picked up something strange. At exactly 3:47 a.m., something appeared in the sky over Yuba County. It wasn't a plane. It wasn't a weather balloon. It was something that, according to our instruments, didn't exist at all. She showed them more files. Each one told the same story. People would go missing, and when they were found, their bodies had impossible things inside them. Metals that didn't exist. Technology that shouldn't be possible. And always, those strange burn marks shaped like circles with 3 dots. The military had been watching these cases for years. They called it Project Echo. Every time it happened, the pattern was the same. Strange lights in the sky. Watches stopping at 3:47 a.m. People found dead with looks of terror on their faces. But the Yuba County 5 were different. They were the first ones to leave evidence behind. Captain Hayes pulled out the metal disc they had found in Mike's pocket. "This," she said, "is not from our time. The metal isn't just unknown. It's impossible. It's made of atoms that don't exist yet. They won't exist for hundreds of years." Linda and Tom listened as Hayes explained more. The military had found radiation around the old mine site, but it wasn't any kind of radiation they knew. The pictures from James's camera showed technology that their best scientists couldn't understand. And Robert Anderson, the man who was still missing, had become the most important part of the mystery. "We think they saw something they weren't supposed to see," Hayes said. "Something that's been using our world, our time, for its own purposes. And now that they've seen it, it's starting to notice us noticing it." As if to prove her point, all their phones started ringing at once. The lights flickered, and that now familiar cold feeling filled the room. On Hayes's laptop, strange numbers started appearing by themselves. They were coordinates, pointing to different places around Yuba County. And at the top of the screen, words appeared that made everyone's blood run cold. Time DTKTE. Containment failing. Subject Robert Anderson. AP Proroiching Kilon V or GNC. Captain Hayes closed her laptop quickly. "We need to move fast," she said, "because whatever took your 5 men that night, it's coming back. And this time, it's not trying to hide anymore." The room grew darker, even though it was noon outside. In the distance, dogs started barking again. Something was about to happen in Yuba County. Something that would finally reveal the truth about what happened to 5 men on a cold winter night in 1978. Captain Hayes, Detective Bradford, and Sheriff Marshall worked through the night in the police station. They spread all the evidence on a big table: the metal disc, the strange photos, Gary's note, and the items found with the bodies. Like pieces of a puzzle, things started to make sense in a way that scared them. Tom picked up the metal disc again. Under the bright lights, he saw something new. Tiny words appeared on its surface when he held it at just the right angle. They read, Temporal Research Station 47. Established 2157. The date made his hands shake. This object came from almost 200 years in the future. Linda brought out James Wilson's camera photos again. Now that they knew what to look for, the blurry building in the woods wasn't just any building. It was a research station, hidden by technology they couldn't understand. The men in white suits weren't aliens or ghosts. They were scientists from the future. Captain Hayes opened her laptop and showed them files from other military bases. Every few months, she explained, our computers pick up signals that don't make sense. Messages and codes we can't break. But last week, one came through that we could read. She turned the screen so they could see. Warning. Timeline contamination detected. 5 subjects exposed to Temporal Station 47. Emergency protocols engage. Containment essential. They found more clues in the men's belongings. In David Carter's wallet was a piece of paper with numbers written on it. They weren't phone numbers or addresses. They were dates. Future dates. Times when bad things would happen. Things these future scientists were trying to stop. They were trying to change time, Tom said slowly. These men from the future. They built a hidden station in our time, trying to fix something that goes wrong. He looked at the dates again. The first one was in 1986, just 7 years away. Linda remembered something else. Robert Anderson, the missing man, had been a physics teacher. The day before he disappeared, he had told his class something strange. He said that time wasn't like a river flowing one way. It was like a web, with connections everywhere. His students thought he was just teaching science. Now they knew he had discovered something real. Captain Hayes gathered them around a map. She pointed to where each body had been found. When they connected the points, they made the same symbol that was burned on the men's hands, a circle with 3 dots. It wasn't just a mark. It was a map showing where the time station could appear. The 5 men didn't just stumble onto this place, Hayes said. They were chosen. The future needed them for something, but something went wrong. Something so bad that it scared them to death. As she spoke, her laptop started beeping. New signals were coming in. The computer translated them automatically. Timeline breach critical. Subject Robert Anderson location confirmed. Convergence imminent. All stations prepare for temporal shock. The lights in the police station went out. When they came back on, the metal disc was floating above the table, spinning slowly in the air. Through the windows, they could see blue lights in the sky over the mountains. Tom looked at his watch. It was 3:46 a.m. In 1 minute, everything would change. The truth about the Yuba County 5 was about to come out, and it was bigger than anyone had imagined. Something was coming through time itself, and it was coming for them. The blue lights in the sky grew brighter over Yuba County. It was January 1980, almost 2 years since the 5 men had disappeared. The air felt electric, and every dog in town was howling. At exactly 3:47 a.m., a flash of light lit up the old mine area like daytime. Sheriff Linda Marshall, Detective Tom Bradford, and Captain Hayes raced up the mountain road in their cars. When they reached the mine, they found something impossible. Robert Anderson was standing there, wearing the same clothes he had worn 2 years ago. He looked exactly the same, like no time had passed at all. "Where are the others?" were his first words. When they told him his friends had been found dead nearly 2 years ago, he shook his head in disbelief. "No," he said, "I just saw them an hour ago. We were running from the lights." They took Robert to the police station. He was confused and scared, but he remembered everything. He told them about the night they disappeared, speaking quickly like he was afraid he'd forget the details. "We saw the lights first," he said. "They came down from the sky near the old mine. Gary wanted to check it out. We thought maybe someone was in trouble. Robert's hands shook as he drank his coffee. But what we found wasn't anyone in trouble. It was a door. A door made of light. Robert explained how they had walked through the door. Inside, they found a huge room full of strange machines. People in white suits were working there, but they looked right through the 5 men like they couldn't see them. They were from the future, Robert said. We saw the date on their computers, 2157. They had built this place between times. They called it a temporal research station. They were trying to stop something terrible from happening. Captain Hayes showed Robert the metal disc they had found. His eyes went wide. That's the key, he said. Mike grabbed it when we were running. It's what they used to open the doors between times. But the worst part was what Robert told them next. The future scientists weren't just studying time. They were trying to change it. They had found a way to send people's minds through time, to make small changes that would stop bad things from happening. But it went wrong, Robert said, his voice shaking. When they saw us, everything went crazy. Alarms started going off. They said we were temporal contamination, that we'd seen too much. He paused, looking at his hands. They tried to catch us. Gary, Mike, David, and James. They got caught in something called a time loop. Their bodies came back, but their minds are still trapped there, somewhere in time. Captain Hayes's laptop started beeping again. New messages were coming through from the future. Robert read them, and his face went white. No, he whispered. No. They're saying we caused it. By trying to escape, by taking that disc, we made the very thing they were trying to prevent happen. The lights in the station flickered again. Robert looked at his watch. The same watch that had stopped 2 years ago. It was working now, counting down to something. They let me come back to warn you, he said. In 1986, something's going to happen. Something that changes everything. And now, because of what we did that night, there's no way to stop it. Outside, the blue lights were getting brighter again. Time itself was breaking in Yuba County, and Robert Anderson's warning was just the beginning of the end. Captain Jennifer Hayes sat alone in her office at the Pentagon in March 1986. On her desk were all the files about the Yuba County 5 case. She hadn't slept well in days because she knew what was coming. Robert Anderson's warning had been clear. Something was going to happen this year, something they had accidentally caused that night in 1978. The metal disc they had found sat in a special box on her desk. Over the years, scientists had studied it but learned nothing. The strange metals inside it were still impossible to understand. But now, as the date Robert had warned them about got closer, the disc had started to glow. In Yuba County, Sheriff Linda Marshall and Detective Tom Bradford watched the old mine site carefully. Strange lights appeared there more often now. Sometimes people heard voices coming from the woods, voices that spoke about things that hadn't happened yet. Robert Anderson lived alone in a small house near the police station. He hadn't aged a day since his return in 1980. He spent his time writing in notebooks, trying to remember everything he had seen in the future. But each day, his memories got more cloudy, like a dream fading in the morning. One day in April, Captain Hayes got an urgent message. A nuclear power plant in Europe was having problems. The date matched exactly with what Robert had written in his notebooks. As she read the report, her coffee cup started to vibrate on her desk, just like Linda's had done years ago. Hayes called an emergency meeting with Linda and Tom. They met in the same room where they had first learned the truth. Robert came too, bringing all his notebooks. As they talked, they finally understood the whole story. The future scientists had built their time station to stop the nuclear accident, but when the 5 men found it that night, everything changed. The metal disc Mike took, the pictures James snapped, the readings their bodies carried, all of these things caused tiny changes in time. These small changes added up to one big change that actually made the accident more likely to happen. It's a loop, Robert explained, his voice tired. "We saw them trying to stop the accident, so we interfered, which made the accident happen, which made them build the station to stop it, which made us find it." He looked older suddenly, even though his face hadn't changed. Time isn't a straight line. It's a circle, and we're trapped in it. Captain Hayes made the hardest decision of her life that day. The truth about the Yuba County Five had to stay secret. If people knew about the time station, about the future scientists, about what really happened that night, they might try to change things. And that would only make everything worse. They gathered all the evidence, the photos, the disc, the notebooks, everything, and locked it away in a special vault. The official story would stay the same. 5 men went missing in the woods, 4 were found dead, and 1 returned with no memory of what happened. As they left the police station that night, Robert looked up at the sky. The blue lights were there again, but fainter now, like they were fading away. "They'll keep trying," he said quietly. "The future will keep trying to fix things, but sometimes the only way to fix something is to let it happen." Years passed. Linda retired. Tom moved away. Captain Hayes kept watching for more cases like the Yuba County Five, but none ever came. The time station had done its job, not by stopping the accident, but by making sure it happened exactly as it was supposed to. And somewhere in the future, in 2157, scientists were still watching, still trying to understand what went wrong, still wondering about 5 men who changed history just by seeing something they weren't supposed to see.